it's strategy day today, and we're going to talk about strategy for handling business. How do we get what we're trying to get in the world out here?
Let's do this. I love that.
Most delicious of Brian's. How do we make this happen?
Why is today strategy day, Zamboni? Most funky of Zambonis.
Well, because the reading that we got that came in is a strategy reading. Well,
yes, that's totally true. Strategy day. Yeah. How do we get what we want? Is that what you just asked me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Sure. I'll solve it. Everybody take notes. You're about to find out how to get everything you want.
Right.
Real simple.
Step one, find out what you want.
Fuck you want. Yeah, exactly.
All right. I will see you next lifetime.
Exactly. In about 100 years, we'll find out what's going on. It's the best trick. Actually, you know what? I was actually doing some real classical magic over the last couple of days. I don't want to get into too many specifics on this one because the operation's still cooking, but the theory is very explainable. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it was literally it took me about 6 months to figure out what I actually wanted out of this thing. And it was worth pulling it apart lots of different ways, because, I had a very clear desire, but then I was like, ooh, the way I'm thinking about it now affects other people in my life the way that I don't like. Like that's not refined enough. There's the cost. If it arrived in its first form, the cost was too high for me for how it played out with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I waited a little bit, and then I was like, oh, actually, if I sit with it, this other way of approaching it that's actually kind of more communal, things other people through, that would actually make me maybe even happier than the first one. And I think that's one of the things is you shouldn't feel like you're settling in the desire, right? But you might be able to be like, oh, I've refined it and it actually works better than what I thought. Like that's a good indicator. Mm-hmm. But then it was like, okay, cool, I want to do this, but what is the timing? Not even just the practicalities of like, what is my what do I got going on? When can I sit down and do some magic? But also like, what is the timing? And like, unlike your gift itself, I do a little less with big astro on this, and I tend to look for lunar timings and deckhand stuff, just because that's my thing. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. So last night was good timing for what I wanted to do on a lunar day, and some other stuff.
Last night with eclipse season and all that, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Listen,
okay, yeah, sure.
We're setting stuff free here, Zamboni. We're setting stuff free. But once
on a North Node?
What?
Sure. No, never mind. Good. Go ahead. Tell me more.
It's some 8th house shit.
I don't have to quibble like this. I don't have to be an asshole about it.
So found a timing, but then this next piece is something I want to talk to you about. So far we just talked about normal magic stuff, right? Figure out what you want, figure out a timing to do some magic in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this next piece gets missed a lot, which is then reading the omens and pulling the threads. So like what I see happen in my own practice is you sort of announce there's going to be a ritual. Like I'm doing this thing, I have a desire, it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And I had sketched mine out. I knew exactly what I wanted the shape to look like, what I was going to do during the timing, all this kind of stuff. But then the universe begins offering me gifts and offering little threads to pull here, little things to do there, all little, plus ones to the operation, a gift from a friend that turns out to be like actually kind of appropriate to the ritual, a change in the timing slightly that actually points out like, oh, this is even better than what, this kind of stuff. So the sitting with omens piece, when you have enough time, like obviously if you're like, I need a ritual in 15 minutes,
Sure.
fuck the time, and I'm just going to go ahead and do what I can do. That's important too. But then starting to notice noticing how other people were acting around the topic and seeing them start to shift in the same timing, because I do think there's a wisdom of crowds with astrology. Like I think we're all responding to it at all times, right? We're moving through it. And so some people are really good at this naturally, and these people I think we call lucky, but everybody starts doing a little bit. So you start kind of reading the tea leaves on how people are talking around you, and like I put poetry together this way too, right? Like I steal a line here, I steal a line there. I start to feel the rhythm of something happening. So I spent a lot of time in that pose. Do you, because you have a musical mind, do you find that, like, okay, so you've set an intention, you have an idea about either a ritual or an action you're going to take, something to get it done. Do you find if there's space, you have the same thing happening, like sort of like the universe chatter starts for you?
Okay. So if I'm being very honest, my magic and ritual practice has been very not happening recently. I've been like emotional and sad and whatever else, and so like my shit has not really been on point. My rituals almost always do include some song in them because singing feels appropriate to me all the time. Dancing feels really appropriate to me. And so I like wrote a whole song about gratitude that I use as my as my jump off point a lot of times. And so that is something that I do, and I have maintained my ancestor practice. And so every morning I do my little coffee and my little shout out to the ancestors in the morning. And that is primarily what I do. So my shit has not been on point recently. And so I haven't done a lot of this like sort of like I'm going to shoot at a goal and try to do a thing. I have done some like honey jars and this kind of thing. The most recent honey jar I did not turn out in the way that I wanted it to. And so that one, if I'm honest, didn't really include very much song, singing and dancing and this kind of thing. I just kind of expected it to sweeten the whole situation, and maybe it did, but like not enough to make it go the direction that I wanted it to. So I like what you're talking about like being aware. I think that there's a certain awareness that you're really getting at there, and having that kind of awareness, I think, is important in operating wisely, which is what a wizard might do. I'm not sure that I have always done that.
No, me neither. And actually, this is a redo on an operation that didn't work for me. Like it's sort of the same kind of thing where there were some effects, but it didn't land all the way. And like I say, I'm being vague on this one because it hasn't landed all the way yet. There were just some early signs of like thumbs up, some early movement. But I think that's important to talk about too, is that we do have to iterate with this stuff. Like not all your strategy is going to work. And I don't want anybody here being like, Brian only talks about the ones that land. Like, nope. I took an approach on this one that was a little too nice, honestly. Like I left too many loopholes in this particular operation, right? It was, so I worked, which basically caused me to work on my own shit, get myself together, and then find a new approach, right? But I needed that failure to refine things in the process. Although I would say, I know you've done some work for clients and for friends and things like that in this time period as well. Like I will accept, I'll accept that you have not done as much personal ritual in this time period.
Well, I mean, I don't do like spell work for other people. I do readings for other people. So like, does that count as magic? Sure. When I first got into magic, I was like, oh, astrology is magic to know things by. And so I do that. But
well, and then, so the awareness piece also, I think, plays into a lot of different areas, which is one reason I want to talk about it. Because like, even if you're not doing magic stuff, awareness is something you should be practicing.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I have spent a lot of time and energy on recently, if not spell work, is my sort of universal theory of everything, which is about shape. Like the shape of everything is the only thing that exists. And therefore, if you can understand how shape is and why, therefore, metaphor would work, like the idea that like putting yourself into a particular position, dressing in a certain kind of way, sympathetic magic, this kind of like idea. Why would that work? It's like because it's all this metaphor, and this metaphor like turns into this greater shape of everything, right? If you get the shape right, then the shape goes on to manifest, flourish in some kind of way that ideally is the thing that you want, that generates the kind of world that you want to live in. And so as I have spent a lot of time working on that sort of theory of everything, and trying to then live my life as if shape is the only thing. And so that is, maybe in pursuit of wisdom or something like this.
I would think so. The awareness to shape is an interesting thing too. So I think some of the folks listening to us probably done sigil stuff. You know what I mean? If you haven't done sigil stuff, look at Gordon White's sigil stuff. It's the stuff on sigil stuff,
Right.
And if anybody is more from the astro line, doesn't do that kind of stuff, it's writing down squiggles that get you what you want. Like that's pretty much it. But one of the things that's weird is when you are assembling a sigil, you can start to feel that it's not right. So, this metaphorical shape that you're making that communicates something to the universe or your mind or however people want to define things, isn't actually it. Like, you got to tear that up and start again. Something's not right about it. And I think but if your awareness isn't on, you might just draw something and be like, that's fine, that'll work. You're sort of you're numb to the feeling.
Yeah, I am conflicted about that. I'm conflicted about because kind of it is fine. Sigils are so there's nothing to them, and at a certain level, you know what I mean. You're just they're literally squiggles, and you just squiggle some shit on there, and be like, okay, let me squiggle it another time, and be like, I don't know, is it done? I guess so.
I think for me there is something to it's got to feel right to you.
Right. This is true.
You know what I mean? So I some people take a real, you got to use the alphabet in certain ways and do, all this kind of shit. And these days I do think there's a good exercise in writing out what you desire, making a clear statement of intent. But then often I won't rearrange it into broken up letters and then into different shapes and all this sort of stuff. I'll just wait until the feeling of the shape comes into my head, and while I stare at it, and then I'll draw that. And that's not to say the other method isn't great. I've done it lots of times, and sometimes I still do. But there's something. It's that's a method to get me to the shape, which is awesome. But if the shape shows up on its own, then I don't need a method to get there. It's just waiting on the shape. But you do need to feel right, whether that feels right to you. And I think there is one advantage in what you're saying here is that people can get over anxious about this and freeze themselves up and not do sigil meditation. And that is 100% wrong. Do you know what I mean? That's
Sure.
If you didn't make a sigil, you did it wrong.
Right.
And there is probably something true in any of the drawings you do. Right. But if it feels wrong to you, as opposed to just
right. I have had sigils that happened too, where I just couldn't get it to be right. I just couldn't make it, work. And which always makes me feel dumb in those moments. Cause I'm this is literal. It's just squiggles. I don't even I'm not trying to draw a hand. Have you ever tried to draw a hand before? It's the most difficult thing possible. It's ridiculous. Who knew that hands were such complex anatomy? But I'm not trying to do any of that shit. I'm just fucking crossing around and let me throw a in there.
Like a scene painter in the 70s. You know what I mean? I'm just
right.
I got luck.
Very whatever. And then if I can't get it right, then I'm like, what do you mean it's not right? This doesn't make any damn sense. But it's magic. Of course it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. But it also, I think it's because it is touching on how good is your metaphor. Do you know what I mean? Or how much do you connect in that moment? Because that is very personal. I'm reasonably certain that if I showed you my sigils, you would just be like,
right,
nice squiggles. Every now and again I see somebody who's a real artist has made some sigils, and I'm like, damn, those feel magical as fuck.
Yeah. Totally.
Mine are not that.
Right.
They were.
One time a girl came over and saw I had them all like posted up on my wall. She was like, I can really see your handwriting in this. I was like, yes, those are mine.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a stack that for a while, when I didn't make as many sigils, I thought I would make a poem for each one to release it. Like just collect a bunch and then write a little poem, like
that's a lot of work.
A lot. I've done a lot of sigils, so now I'm actually thinking I'm just going to do like a line, like a sentence. Like I look at it, whatever sentence comes to mind, write it down. Next one, whatever it is, you just build a poem out of that. Now that I've really forgotten what these were for, like these are like from like 3 or 4 years ago. I have no fucking clue.
I think was I hungry that day?
Yeah. I know that a good bunch of them have to do with coffee because that's my RoboFish. But like,
right, sure.
Other than that, I don't know what's up. So there's that awareness there, and then there's like what I like about the awareness play too is that your desire becomes linked out in the world, right? Like you start seeing it connect to other things. You realize, because I think a lot of times we think our desires are individual. And they are to some degree, but they are also influenced and touching quite a lot of other things. So,
yeah, man, the issue of desire and one's own desire, and what you said before about settling is real. I'm so, yeah, it's so tough. It's tough. So, one of the things that you said before we started the thing here is like that we were looking at the reading that we're going to do in a little bit.
Yeah.
And you're like, this might not be so bad. It's a romance reading. And I always love when a romance reading doesn't just immediately tank, because most of them do. Most of them, like, you it's like, you gotta dump this guy. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I will talk around that for the next 15 minutes if you'd like, but
this guy's trash.
You haven't talked to him in 2 weeks, and he's told you that he doesn't want to talk to you anymore. What do you want from me right now? What
was that meme you sent me the other day about romance reading?
Right. I just need confirmation that the reason he's cheating on me is because somebody cursed him.
Yes.
What are you talking about right now?
Which I swear is like a question I've gotten. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like it's.
I've seen this question before.
You're like, oh, okay.
Right, and you've already paid the money, so okay, here we go.
Right, we'll throw some dice or something, but I'm just going to go ahead and answer this, and then we'll throw some dice.
Right.
But
so
yeah,
I have a question here about settling, because I get a lot of people. So that's the most common one, right? Like, how do I save this relationship that is so doomed? And there's just not shit you can do about that. But then the other one that is most common is, when am I going to find a partner, or something like this? Like, I'm single right now, and nothing is happening.
Right.
WTF? You know what I mean? And so then looking at the dating market as it stands right now, which is absolute trash, just from all angles. And it's just, and then you get people who like have been trying for a long time, and then you get to a certain point where it's like, do you have to, is this gonna work for you? You know what I mean? Like, how do you navigate settling versus not settling in that scenario?
So for this, not trying to split hairs for me, but I have a definition of settling that matters for how I navigate this, which is that settling is when you take something is not good enough for what you need, despite knowing it's not good enough for you. Like it's got a little piece of what you need. It's not enough, but you're like, you know what? I'll take it. Right.
Sure.
This is the.
Okay. So in this scenario, then staying single doesn't count as settling.
No.
Just staying single and just being like, okay, I guess I love myself so much that I'm just gonna, okay, fine. That doesn't count as settling to you.
It could for some people.
I'm gonna up my self-love game because that's all I got right now.
So the reason I have this definition for it is that I think there actually are better understandings of desires that are possible that some people would use the same term for settling, and I use it differently. So like people will sometimes have an expectation of their absolute knight in shining armor monogamy fantasy about everything, right? Mm-hmm. And then anything that isn't that is settling. Mm-hmm. Well, is that even what you actually want, or have you just taken a story out of the air that has gotten in your brain? Do you know what I mean? Like, and for some people, it is actually what they really want, and they're not going to wait. They're going to not settle for anything short of that. Cool. But for a lot of people, that kind of thing is actually a sort of toxic. It's almost like a demon, to be honest. Like it's preventing them from finding love that would be totally fulfilling for what they really want, and would give them everything they need. But they've put an image, like honestly, like an idol, in the way of love. It's sort of an act of idolatry, because it's not about a person anymore. It's about an image or an icon that you're going to try to slot people into, which is using them as an object. It's, it's not about meeting someone real. It's not about authentic connection. So, what I tend to think is that, like, if you have that, again, this is awareness. If you have that feeling, you're like, I guess I'll take it. Well, that's not what we're after. Do you know what I mean? But if you have the thing where you're like, actually, I always thought the person I love would need a Ferrari, and I've met this guy with a Lamborghini, and it's great. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you learn and become aware of things, then it's different, right? So that's what I'm trying to think in terms of discernment there.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I mean, this is not the reading that I actually end up doing a lot of times. The reading that I actually end up doing for real people is like, I cannot find a dude who's gonna text me back. These motherfuckers are all trash, and and they be going through them sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, really trying to find somebody who's just gonna, like, because the bar be on the floor a lot of times. You know what I mean? Like, can I just get a modicum of like respect and dignity from this man? And no seems to be the answer so much of the time. And so I just, I don't know that the issue is idolatry in that moment.
No, in that case, probably not. Although one of the things I wonder about in those cases is, why are you hanging out with such trash people?
Right. Sure.
What else is going on here? So what else is going on here is actually some of the question. And that's why the I'll stay single and love myself thing could be settling, or it could be actually what is correct at the moment. That's much better. Having had, it's sometimes that can be something that lets you know what you need, and that's okay. But like, it's, in generality, this becomes difficult to parse, right? When you're talking to a person and they're like, I've tried to date every guy at this church I've been to, and they all treat me like trash. And you're like, you need to go to a new church. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, this is...
Yeah, that's real. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
And why do you let people, and then, but these things are hard. And I think it's also very good to be gentle with people in these cases, because, like, so much of what we get hung up on or get in our way is maybe not even stuff that we've, it's it's an idea somebody else put in our heads. It's bad experiences with a bunch of people. There's a lot of healing work here too,
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make it specific a little bit. So we got Jordan on the line today, And so, Jordan, let me read the question here. We are going to get to this reading, but before we do that, did you know that you can get a reading just like it? Go to ZamboniFunk.com/store. And there you will find an intake form, or you can also send me an email. Just if you send me an email, just make sure to include your name, your date, time, place of birth, and a question. All of that matters, so I can do the astrology for you. So it's free. You can it's always a lottery, so like we'll just take a look at whoever brings their question, and then somebody will get chosen and we'll read for you online or on this podcast here. So make sure and do that. I just shout out ZamboniFunk.com because first, the website is very cute. Thank you for noticing. Yes, I made it. And then it's also, that's where you can find the coursework, Astrology from the Ground Up is right there on the front page of ZamboniFunk.com. You can also find the merch that is available there. You can also find a 10-minute reading where you can get you can get all kinds of readings there at ZamboniFunk.com. You can get a Zoom reading where we talk back and forth. Those come in 60 or 30 minutes. You can get a 10-minute reading, which is very much like the weekly forecast that I do, where I'll talk directly to you in this format, where I'll talk to the camera and sort of like get into whatever is specific to you. Those are sometimes better for things that are going to be like a little private or something like this, or if we don't get to you because the lottery happened and you didn't get chosen. That does happen sometimes. All of that is available at ZamboniFunk.com. Without further ado, let's see what's going on here with Jordan. Yeah, okay, so Jordan is going through a lonely patch and needs some love. What is a good strategy for Jordan to meet some potential partners? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, geomancy is tough with strategy. So you wanna lead in with that? Sure.
So geomancy is tough. Geomancy is very straightforward on this stuff. But as Zamboni said from the beginning, I was like, oh, looks like it's not too bad. The judgment in this case is we have Caput Draconis, the head of the dragon, meets Albus, the white wizard, the scholar, and the combination of the two is gain. Right. So this is why I'm like, okay, we're gaining here. We're doing okay. We're getting stuff in there. The long outcome, the sentence of this is Carcer. Carcer is the tower. It's also a wedding ring. It's things that separate and contain and lock things up. So it's typically a bad thing in most cases, but in cases like this, like there's literal things where it's like, oh, you're going to find somebody to get married. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of like, so it has a more neutral in this kind of question.
The old ball and chain.
Exactly, right? That's exactly the kind of vibe. But when we look at the judgment again, so Caput is also the big yes. So it's when it's saying yes to a lot. So that's the energy that Jordan's bringing this. Like, yes, I want this. Yes, yes, yes. And it's like, okay, well, slow down. Maybe you're saying yes to a lot, so that's part of it. And then Albus is a very analytical figure. So it's a figure of absent-minded professorness as well, but like getting real mercurial in your approach to things, which maybe isn't always. This is Mercury and Gemini, you know what I mean? So it's not always the best for hooking up. It's better for debates, for scholarly debates. But when you apply an energy of yes, I can, yes, I should do this, yes, I can, to wisdom, to scholarship, what you do get is a gain, right? And so we're talking about a strategy here. So the way I read the judgment in this case is this is the strategy at a core that you need to apply. You need to say yes to some stuff. You need to be smart about it. And that's how you're going to get there. Like this, instead of just like, I'm lonely, how do I find things? It's like, no, we need a strategy. We need to have a plan. We need to have a calendar. You know what I mean? Like you need to be on websites. You need to be doing all this kind of stuff. You need to be organizing things and getting going. In particular in the chart, what we see is that the figure in the first house, Jordan's figure, is Fortuna Minor. So has been kind of winging it, has been kind of like, the last two hookups were like friend of a friend you saw at a party. And you know what I mean? Like that kind of a, like, I guess this will work, cool. Let's see where this goes. Not like a the exact opposite of like going to a matchmaker and listing out the things you want, right? This is like whatever comes by. The figure of the seventh house is that Albus figure again. It is the partner in many ways is also this intellectual, like the quality. Since this was a question about how do I find, this is where we again get that same advice. You got to get smart. You got to start getting organized. You got to look around. The worst piece of advice I ever got was also some really great advice. We actually got to ask, when I was writing comic books, we got to ask Neil Gaiman a question one time. We were trying to find artists. We're like, how do you find artists? He's like, go where the artists are, which is the kind of thing that should get him smacked, but is also really good advice. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's both. This is a little bit of that same thing, though. This is a little go where the artists are, right? So it's like get a strategy. Now, what's really interesting in terms of guidance, so for a little more specificity, is we see these two figures move together in the third house and the fourth house. And this is a formation called mutation in geomancy. If we had asked, am I going to find love? This would have been yes, but this is how. So in the question of what is my strategy, this applies a little bit of like, this is where these two meet up. So where do you and the other person meet? You meet in these with a combination of these houses, third and fourth. What's interesting is the seventh house travels to the third. So it kind of goes past the point, like kind of exchange positions. And the first house goes to the fourth. So what that tells me here is this is a short-term communication, like texting, talking, mercurial kind of connection that you got to get here. That's where the partner comes in through, is that kind of stuff. And in your case, in Jordan's case, the way that's connecting is through home, location, house, like the sort of core stuff. Also like parental things, you know what I mean? Like the sort of ancestry and the line, the house in that sense.
Okay.
So what I would actually say, what does that mean in this particular case, is that you've been kind of getting lucky in the neighborhood. Do you know what I mean? You've been kind of lucky around the house. That's okay, right? You don't need to go foreign fields. You don't have to travel a long way to find somebody. You don't have to get an internet lover across the country, but instead it's still close to home. But it's going to involve this so rather than going out to bars in your area and hoping to pick up somebody and seeing who you can meet, or hoping there's somebody fun at the coffee shop, you need to really take some stock and say, hey, how are people meeting in my area? How are they talking to each other? What is actually going on? And need to go out and do it and get involved in that kind of stuff. The good news is that this outcome produces gain. So, positive answer, so anyway, that's the basics on the chart. What does Astro say?
That's what's up. That's so interesting. It's so interesting. I would be so dismayed if geomancy said something wildly different from the astrology. That's not what happened here. It's really interesting. Every time you say the word carcer, then that's like related to carceral, right? Like the idea of being locked up or something like that. I always think about Capricorn, Saturn and Capricorn.
It is Saturn and Capricorn in geomancy. Yep.
Oh, sure. Great. Love it.
Yeah.
So the reason why that's so interesting here is because so Jordan has Leo in the seventh house, Leo, and so this is empty, and so we're going to look at the ruler of Leo, and the ruler of Leo is the sun. Jordan has the sun in Capricorn, and not only in Capricorn but in the 12th house, and so this sort of underscores what you had said at the beginning, which is like, it's tough. It's not easy going. This doesn't necessarily feel good all of the time. But so the first thing that I would think with a situation like this, the other thing that I think is really interesting here is that we've got Mercury retrograde here in Capricorn as well, here in the 12th. And so you said it was going to be a mercurial kind of situation. So it's chatty, right? So, Mercury retrograde in the 12th, it doesn't look like an easy Mercury natal situation, right? So, like getting chatty with it and talking through the stuff that is going on in your head, and like having fun, easy, flirty conversation probably doesn't come easy for Jordan. This might be a situation that is like, it takes extra work to do that kind of thing. And so that might be part of the situation that we're in here, where it's like, oh, I don't actually know how to talk that good. And so like getting into situations where I have to talk to people and have to initiate a conversation or something like this, like, oh, I kind of would rather not. Like that kind of thing can come up here. So, and that can generate the kind of loneliness that was inherent in the question that was posed. So that's something that's really interesting here. The other thing, so whenever I think about the 12th house, like the 12th house is an area of mental illness can show up, anxiety, depression, that kind of thing. Also addiction can show up in the 12th house. Also remote locations. And retreat or something like that, monastery can show up, this kind of thing. And so I wonder, if we're thinking strategy here, like how do I meet the partner, or where is a good way to think about it. Like, so where are the artists, right? In the 12th house. So, again, this is dicey. Right? There's potential for danger here, but I wonder if there might be a situation where you might be able to go on a retreat or something like this, go on some kind of like, you can go on some kind of prayerful situation, a silent retreat, or like an ayahuasca retreat or something like this, where you're like out there, away from your regular situation, away from the city that you normally live in and all this kind of stuff, out in some kind of remote location. And then when you're in that space, then you're kind of cooped up with people and everybody is having this same transcendental experience or something like this. Like we're all going through this thing that we're all going through together. And so that can be something that does start a little bit of conversation and gets us thinking. And, that can be a place where you're working through healing some of those 12th house things, some of that anxiety or mental illness or those kinds of things. That sort of stuff can come up in those locations. And while you are working on healing all of that, then there's an opportunity for vulnerability that might be useful in this context for someone who might typically struggle with that kind of thing.
The way you're talking about this kind of elucidates something in the geo for me. So, I said before that like could be chatty communication, could be, chats, sort of short-term stuff, but it's also like the third house is also like small learning, like taking a course rather than getting a degree, and, if we're talking like a retreat situation, but maybe not having to travel very far, this kind of stuff, like doing something scholarly. Do you know what I mean? Like taking a seminar, doing a weekend retreat someplace not that far where you're, again, same thing. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I think that's
one thing that we
reason.
can notice here in this chart in regard to that is that we've actually got the ruler of the 9th house, which is going to be the more like get a degree or higher education, or also philosophy, religion. That I think of the 9th house as being like the beyond in some kind of way. Also foreign places, the place that is like literally beyond where you are right now. The ruler of the 9th house is sitting right here on the midheaven. And so there's something here about like, and that is Venus. So you've got the 9th house in Libra, and you've got Venus there sitting on the midheaven. So there's actually something, if Venus is the cute one, Venus is attractive, sweet, loving, connective, all of these kinds of things, then having that Venus right there on the midheaven, like there's something like cuteness can be broadcast, right? Yeah. There's something about being learned that can be broadcast as cute. And that might be something that, for somebody who doesn't necessarily speak well or might have a little bit of a anxiety around that kind of thing, that might be something that actually doesn't necessarily feel like something that would attract other people, interesting people. Like, I don't know if I want to talk about the things that I know about because I stutter or something like this, right?
Yeah.
But there might be an opportunity there for like, I did learn about that one time and I had these ideas, and then there might be somebody around who's like just devastated by that,
I like that too. In my life, I've gotten to talk to a lot of academics, and they get very tight when you ask them about their field. You know what I mean? They kind of want to be like, no one wants to hear about that. But actually quite a lot of people do. It's actually really interesting. Jackasses don't want to hear about it, but like, it's fine to cut out the jackasses. So I think there's something here too of like,
and presentation matters a lot.
Yeah. Presentation matters. Do it pretty. Do have that element there. But sharing about what you like is something I think people are often afraid to do, but is often really attractive when done, right? Because you get passionate about it.
And we can notice that Jordan also has both benefics, Venus and Jupiter, in the 11th house. And there's a lot going on here in the 11th house. We got the South Node here. We got Uranus here. We got Neptune here. There's a lot happening here in the 11th house. But so much traffic here in the 11th house does suggest that some people. And knowing some people. In fact, this was not submitted by Jordan. This was submitted by Jordan's friend, right? And so through Jordan's community, he's going to get this reading, which then is going to like potentially open up some options for him, right? And so I wonder if there might be so to see both the benefics, both of the like do-gooder planets, the ones that bring you joy and things that feel good and connection and harmony and all that sort of stuff. Those planets are in the 11th house, the area of the chart that's associated with community, network, friends, acquaintances, people that aren't necessarily your besties, but that are in your vicinity. Those people, whenever I'm thinking about this, I think about how like Oprah famously has big parties with like 50 or 70 people who she like kind of knows, like her besties are probably in there somewhere, but like the main thing is to be around people who don't know all your business, who are not like all up in your piece all the time, because those people might represent opportunities that you don't actually have, that you're not touching already. And so by surrounding yourself with this group, then you might find yourself with opportunities. And seeing this Uranus here definitely suggests that there might be a certain kind of surprise or chaotic element to the idea of being around other people. And so being around other people might, just like groups of people who you kind of know a little bit, might be a good way for somebody who is a new moon in the 12th house, like, I may not want to be around people all the time. This person has a Saturn ruled rising sign, right? So like there's something, and Saturn in Scorpio, like this wants to hide if possible. Yeah. And so being in that kind of group dynamic, and there might be a certain amount of like fake it till you make it, like get in here and shoot your elevator pitch a few times, you know what I mean? And like get good at doing that, and pretending like you're good in a party environment might be part of the move here.
Well, and there is something to the, even though, I think Albus is that mercurial kind of scholarship, but I think there's something still in the scholarly thing here of like, take notes and, fail to learn. Do you know what I mean? In the sense here of like, go out, be like, here's my elevator pitch. That did not work. Okay. Take a note. Why didn't that work? Do it again. Get some reps.
Learn through failure.
Yeah. Get out and get your reps. By the way, I'm really enjoying the different personalities here again, where like astrology is like, hey, I understand why you might feel this way. Like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like that makes sense. Listen, some stars were weird when you were born. Things are going on, you might want to lean over this way. And Geomancer's like, say yes and have a plan. Like,
Uh-huh.
I don't care about your feelings. This is still the right
Sure.
answer.
And it seems like a good marriage to do
so
both of these things at the same time. Like this feels like a very actionable sort of situation. I feel like Jordan.
I think so too, and I hope Jordan feels good that way.
Some good prospects here.
Yeah. And again, I think for all my jokes about Geomancer not caring about your feelings, it is a positive chart. Like there's gain in this chart. And, in Albus in the seventh, Albus is, perhaps a little more intellectual, this kind of thing, but is usually a figure of virtue and goodness. It's not we're not looking at a rough situation. You know what I mean? Like this is good people.
Word.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck, Jordan. Hope you
good luck.
Hope you find what you're looking for, and hope it turns out marvelous.
I hope it happens soon.
Sure.
Yeah. It's man. Yeah. This is something I do like about the practice of magic quite a lot. Is that it is at its heart rooted in trying to figure out how to help. It's like, how do we? All right, we got stuff going on. How do we deal with it? What do we do?
Right.
And I think sometimes there can be approaches to life that are either like just accept it. Although astrology can get that way sometimes. The sort of stoic astrology thing, like learn to love your fate. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Well, sure. That's
to love
true.
These nuts, Chris Brennan. That's what I'm.
Word. Yeah. I mean, there is that, right? The learn to love your fate, and man, I was just doing the Q4 quarterly with plant cunning,
which is a good episode, by the way. If people didn't hear that one, it's a good episode.
Was it good? Good.
I thought so. Yeah. I mean, well, you tell the story because it's going to impact. But yeah.
Well, it's just so like when I was preparing for it, I was like, I just have to give these people bad news for 2 hours. I don't have any good news right now. It's all going to shit. Like, and this is not that's the thing. This is not the hard part yet. We're not at the hard part. So I was trying to figure out how, and so that's one of the things about astrology, especially as astrology of like transits and mundane astrology, like where are we going? Where are we as a society going in the future? Like, I don't know if it's always like this. I've only been doing astrology for like 7 years now or something like this, which is not a representative sample of time, right? Sure. So it's maybe there's going to be, but I get the impression that the gods continue to squabble just all the time. The gods are always beefing with each other over something, and so there's just always something really rough to forecast, and there's a certain amount of like, you got to look at that, and you got to get used to that, and you got to be ready for that. It's going to be a little ugly. I don't know. What did you think? You listened to the episode, right?
I did. And, I think people should listen to it. I don't, I think you did a good job of pointing out that, like, it's you got to look at this stuff, but you're pointing out that, like, there's a way to look at it and get grim. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and there's no point in getting grim about stuff.
This is true.
I'm
just not a grim kind of dude. I have a super bleak outlook in the world, and I just like don't. There's no need to be like glum about that.
No, exactly. Yeah. I was actually I listened to a different podcast. Like any middle-aged white man, I was listening to a podcast about the history of Rome, and
I saw you sent that to me. I didn't get time for it. You sent it to me, and I was like, this is 3.5 hours long.
No. Oh no! I only wanted you to look at that one little section. It's a Lex Friedman podcast, which I don't normally listen to, but this was fun with a guy who's out of Wisconsin who does good Roman history stuff. Anyway, one of the things he was talking about was like it was kind of amazing for the period of Rome that, like, unless you lived near the emperor, it kind of didn't matter. Like, if you're a peasant in the middle of Gaul, like when Caesar comes through and burns your shit down and everything else, yeah, it fucking matters. But then like kind of doesn't matter again for 400 years. Like you just, your life is unaffected, And I think there's some of that perspective that's very helpful with this stuff is that, yeah, if you're caught up in this, get it, and it's good to know what stories are out there so you don't get caught up in stuff you don't want to get caught up in, and and you're able to navigate like, oh, this year could be a hard harvest. Like, okay, so not the year to throw 13 big parties. You know what I mean? Like it's that stuff's good to know, but on some level, we're going to be affected by something at some point anyway. Like, and a lot of the time we kind of just do our thing. Like, I'm fond of thinking of, people even during like World War I, World War II, who were just trying to get their farm together and, trying to live their life. Like there's a lot of that going on, even in the midst of something as crazy as all that. So it's, I think we can get caught up by it.
Yeah, I think about that dynamic a lot when I start to get afraid about like the cybernetic tyranny that seems like it wants to come through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, but there's a certain amount of like jaywalking that you still just do. You know what I mean? Like, the rules and whatever, and you gotta maybe like gesture in that direction a little bit. You gotta say the thing or whatever, and then you just kind of live. Then you just kind of, you do your little piece, and then the more totalitarian it gets, then the more the less credible things become. And so as it turns into this like machine that like wants to control everything, then you'd be like, okay, yeah, I see. All right. Yeah. And then, you head to the speakeasy where everybody is at.
Yeah. And in fact, everybody is at the speakeasy in those times, right? Like in some ways, like we might be, so folks who read cards, do less respectable things, this kind of stuff. You kind of always hang out in weird demimon shadow world places, right? But in the times when you're talking about when like big government's trying to crush everybody, then everybody's there. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden your neighbors who were, really fussy about your lifestyle 2 years ago are now like, hey, where do you get that good whiskey? Like
for sure.
Which is not to belittle the oppressive circumstances that are out there. There's a lot of suffering that can happen these things too, but again, people live through them. People come up with stuff. People come up with interesting things to do that like we're adaptable. Like that's what we're supposed to. And, I actually think we deal with spirits and gods in the same way. That like, the gods squabble, they push us around the board, very powerful, et cetera, et cetera. And yet we're still here. You know what I mean? No god has wiped us off the planet yet. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I'm just like, interesting. Like if the world is full of all powerful beings that want to get rid of us, want to control us, everything else. Clearly we have some kind of value to the system. We haven't been eradicated, in fact, multiplied quite a lot, actually, maybe too much. But so I try to like, I think every circumstance and every tyrant and every bully and everybody else wants to tell you how tough they are all the time, and how unbeatable they are all the time. And every time I hear that, I'm like, well, everything crumbles, man.
Yeah, sure.
Like nothing lasts for those guys too.
Right. Time is this way.
Yep.
So the other thing that I wanted to mention is like, when looking at mundane astrology and this kind of thing, then you have to have a kind of stoic approach about things and be like, okay, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. And you got to look at it and it's going to be a little ugly sometimes, but that's what it's going to be. And it can be helpful to see it coming. Maybe you can prepare yourself a little bit or something like this. But in the case of natal astrology, like what we were doing just now is you got some good shit over here. So what if you looked at that? What if you went in and leaned in that direction? Like here's where your opportunities are. And so that can be something that's super helpful.
I think
and hopeful.
I agree. I also am really liking, and you and I have talked about this, and I think you've been very helpful with me in figuring this out for myself too. But I like looking at, and this is your thing, looking at the malefics as challenges, right? Like this is shit I got to learn. I might not like learning it, you know. I get annoyed. I got to learn this shit. But there's real strength to be had there too. So you know, we were talking about in Jordan's case having the Saturnian rising, and then you know Saturn and Scorpio, and these sort of connections where it's like, oh, you might want to hide, you know. Well, you also might get a shit ton more done than my dumbass who wants to talk to everybody who comes by. Like it's, you know, there are ways to find strengths in these things and make them work with them so that you learn and you change. Like, you know, the Saturn in my chart is in my second. And the more that I do my budgets and sit down and like actually look at my, you know, which I do not like to do, or no, let me correct that. I don't want to put that out in the world anymore. I have learned to like to do. I've learned the power of it, and I've learned it actually feels pretty great. Yeah, and but what it means is like if I just go and I'm like I'm a Jupiter baby, I'm gonna throw money everywhere. Well, then the money will be gone. It will be gone. There's no doubt.
Yeah, you know, especially Saturn. Saturn is the one that I don't know. There's such tough difficulty associated with Saturn, and most of the readings that I do are for people who are under, I'd say 35. You know, I get a lot of people who are brand new, you know, 20 years old or something like this, and you see somebody who's like got a Saturn ruled rising or a Saturn ruled whatever their question is, and then I got to be like, all right, look, Saturn is a late bloomer, okay? Like this is this is gonna take you some time to like get into it. And I say that over and over and over, and I just say that all the time, and that's never good news. They hate that shit. Yeah. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear I've got 45 years before I'm gonna what are you talking about? But the other day I did a reading for somebody who was 2 Saturn returns deep. And had a very similar situation where it was like a bunch of Saturn stuff going on. And I was like, okay, so this probably was real hard before, but you are in the lessons learned phase of your life. And she was like, you know what? You're right. Okay. Okay, let's do this then. Let's do some elder shit because there's one of the things that I love the most in the world is an old lady who don't give a fuck.
Not good. Yes, that is a beautiful creature on this planet.
Right? She has seen it. She don't give a shit about what you think. I got this.
No. Like, she's going to tell you about how she does not give a shit about what you think too.
Right. Yeah, and that's just it's so being able to say that and then watch I got to watch it that like build her up a little bit. You know what I mean? And it's good confirmation for me too, because I be saying that shit about Saturn all the time, and I'm not sure. So sometimes because I got Saturn shit going on in my chart also. Like I have Saturn in and ruling the 7th, and so I be sad and lonely, and oh my god, is it just I just you know what I mean? And then I guess fine. I guess I'm just gonna be alone forever. Then fine, okay, sure. But you know, it's good to see the example of like like. Saturn does come around at some point. Yeah. If you survive long enough, that's the thing. Sometimes you don't survive long enough.
You need to work on that piece. You gotta and you know, it's funny. So we talk about Saturn. I think there's because of the Saturn return and things too. I think people talk about the Saturn piece of the malefics a lot. I'm coming to really love Mars in a lot of ways.
Tell me about that.
I can't remember if I mentioned here before or not, but I had a big experience a couple of years ago where I realized I had kind of arranged my life to cut Mars out because I'd had some like really intense martial stuff, and I was like, you know, breaking noses and smoking cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like this was my forms of entertainment. You know, and it was just like when my son was born, I was like, I can't be living this way anymore. This is stupid. You know, But I went a little too far, and then I had to reconfigure my relationship with Mars. In which I began looking at some of the Orphic hymn stuff, and there's a lot in there about like, you know, Deo, you know, goddess of the earth, like let Mars be in your service. You know what I mean? Mars as the farmer.
Right. Beat the swords into plowshares.
Exactly. And but there's also Mars as the smith, Mars as the maker of things. So Mars is the one who deals with the fire. Mars as Jesse Waters will say, the bad man at the door that keeps the other bad men away, Mars is the Raguel, which is the angel of Tuesday that I like the most, is the angel of boundaries, angel of and also sheepdogs. You know what I mean? It's like watching the edges of the thing. Mm-hmm. And so there's something about the drive that Mars has that I think sometimes we untempered steel, you know what I mean? Or an ungoverned fire. These are bad things. It's real bad. It's not going to work. Mm-hmm. But if you take the time to work with this energy, to let it give you drive and focus and power rather than trying to let it just run everywhere, comes such a great source of strength and a surety, right? And I think we have done a bad job with teaching people how to do this, in particular.
Sure.
But if you can find that in yourself, it's really, really helpful, I think.
Most deaf, yeah. The thing that I always say to people who've got a bunch of Mars up in your piece is Mars does best when there's a job to accomplish. So if there's a thing to do, give Mars something to do. The sheepdog is one of my favorite examples, right? Like the dog who if you leave this dog in your living room while you go to work, then this dog is going to tear shit up, and you're going to come home and there's going to be toilet paper everywhere, and the fluff from the pillows is going to be everywhere, and shit's going to be knocked over and all that, because this dog doesn't know how to live, right? But if you give this dog some sheep to herd, then now he's got something to do, and that's all he wants to do. He wants to be out here running around, making sure these sheep are in line. And that, if you give Mars that kind of, and then there's this. I heard something earlier today where one of these scientist type dudes was the science podcast guys was talking about dopamine. You know how they love talking about dopamine on the science podcast. Yeah. And so people talk about dopamine as being this pleasure hormone. And my man's was it's not about the pursuit of pleasure. Dopamine is about the pleasure of pursuit.
Yes.
And so it feels really good to be doing, to be trying to accomplish something. And that is where Mars really thrives. And so if we can take that, it's all, and this is part of the reason why Mars is exalted in Capricorn, right? Put Mars into Saturn's place where there's, that's that Carcer again, right? There are walls, there are boundaries, don't go outside of these boundaries, right? And then it's we're going in that direction and no other directions. All right, let's fuck them up. And that's where Mars really kills it.
Yeah. And to be fair, I have a Saturn Mars, they're in the same sign hanging out. So that's part of maybe why I'm it's great to temper these things and to give them rules. But
that's just what Mars is though. Cause if you don't, then that's how you get wildfires and, Mars needs the boundaries. Or fight, just you get into trouble when Mars doesn't have appropriate boundaries, right? When the boundaries become inappropriate, this is the sheepdog in the living room scenario, right? To oppressive boundaries where there's no job to accomplish or there's nothing to do in that space, that can be really harmful.
Nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And it turns into self-harm a lot of times and this kind of thing. But
this is what this is one reason I love the planetary understandings of things in how we think about human life. Because whether you see these as some of the Greeks did as these are just the things you hit on the way down, man. This is you manifested in this place, you've incarnated, you got to deal with this shit now. You're here to learn, but the traditions I like are the ones that no, you're here to learn from each of these planets. You're here to sort of take these lessons in your life and transform with them. I think actually people are too nice to the benefics, in the sense that you got I noticed in Jordan's chart, not picking on Jordan, I just saw a chart, that there was Jupiter in Sag, right? Well, that's great. You know what I mean? That can be really great.
Love it.
Yeah. Could also be a lot. You know what I mean? Like it can also be like, I gotta get the next thing. I don't feel good till I move to the next place. I don't feel good till I'm doing this. Oh, this was great. Now what's next? You know what I mean? Never settling. Never. Just needing this constant expansion. It's like the country that keeps getting too big. You know what I mean? Like there's that component. And you gotta
you're right all the time.
What'd you say?
Thinking you're right all the time. That's what Jupiter and Sagittarius will do.
Never heard
just
anything.
Pontificate. Be like, oh, I'm so wise. Let me tell you about how I know all about it.
Never pontificated in my life. Yeah. No, exactly. That kind of vibe. And so the malefics teach you by giving you hard things to deal with. And the benefics teach you by giving you good things to deal with. And good things to deal with can be a problem. Because they feel good.
Or like, parents who took great care of you. You know what I mean? Like this is a thing that I witness sometimes because I have like kind of like a whack relationship with my parents, and I am much more effective than a lot of people who were well taken care of. You know what I mean? Who had parents paying for shit for them and this kind of thing. Like they don't know how to do stuff in a way that like, and I did have a dad. Shout out to my dad who raised me all the way through high school and was a real dickhead about shit a lot of times. And he was one of these people that like would tell me to clean something and then come in and see if I cleaned it. So now I know how to clean shit because I don't want to hear his fucking mouth about it. You know what I mean? I cleaned shit so that he would come in and not have shit to say to me. And so now I know how to do that.
Yeah. And it's actually something I think about with parenting, right? Too, where like you want to thread the needle of, coaching is parenting as far as I'm concerned too, right? Like you want to be the good coach. You want to make sure that they are thriving and they're doing everything. And that may mean that occasionally you need to really kind of lay it down. Like I hope when Wyatt is an adult that he and I are friends, like that he likes hanging out with me, that he comes to me for advice. We will never be strictly speaking just friends.
Sure.
Like it's never going to happen. But I'd like to have a good, he enjoys my company, friendly relationship. At the same time, like, I don't want to be his friend. Do you know what I mean? I want to be his dad. And his dad sometimes goes in his room and is like, you told me 10 minutes ago you were going to clean this and you haven't cleaned it yet. Like, it's funny you brought that up because I just had an interaction with him about that. Where like, like everybody else, he had a moment where he saw one of his books. He picked it up, looked at it. He went off into reading book land. And I was like, you told me you were getting this done. And he was like, shit, And, and as I'm closing the door on his room and everything else, I was like, God, what a dickhead move. Harsh on him for reading it shit,
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so the benefics can coddle you. I mean, like, listen, I got some pounds on me sometimes I'm trying to take off, and Jupiter doesn't have a problem with that. Have another drink, buddy.
Yeah. It's party time.
Yeah, exactly. Steal. What do you want to eat 6 cheeseburgers? Don't do it. Do it.
Right. I'm not the one to stop you. Yeah.
No,
let's get it popping. Invite a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. and those are important. But again, this is why I love the 7, because it's a balance. Like, if you never Jupiter, oh my God, sometimes because I'm working on in a very happy and positive way on improving my health and this stuff and feeling very good about it. You end up I'm watching some YouTube. I'm trying to figure out some tips and tricks, and man, some of these people are like, well, the tip is to remove pleasure from your life completely. And I'm like, you are not healthy. Like that's a
move.
Person.
That's a move. There's there's the aesthetic,
Sure. But
people do that.
but I think the ones who are really good at it, I think they like it. I think they get off on being an aesthetic. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true. But that's learned. You know what I mean? Like that's not something that you don't go into it being like, I love starvation, right? Like you starve for a little while and you're like, okay, yes, I see why one could love this, you know. And
you're talking to a rock. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I understand rock, and you're like, well, choices,
right? Exactly.
And even that, you know, I don't think everything needs to be necessarily like an equal footing, but a balance. Do you know what I mean? Like I think everybody's balance would be a little bit different too.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of astrology, right? Is that it's your shit is in a different spot than somebody else's shit is, and you know, some people have Jupiter in Cancer on the fucking rising. You know, like, okay, sure. Why don't you be a super magnanimous teacher then? You know,
right. And if you're not, why don't you maybe think about it? Maybe fucking get on it. Yeah, one of the things with geomancy that's similar is, and we talked a little bit about this, like because of the math of the chart, you can't make certain combinations without other figures being present. I didn't go into this in Jordan's question because we do, as a practice, try to read about the question because to some extent there's a mathematics to how, you know, you might have a figure in a house that you're not actually talking about that is pretty rough. And some people are like, you just don't read those because they're not relevant. I tend to try to take them into mind because they are relevant about the circumstance that is currently arising, right? Mm-hmm. Like they may not be helpful to a client in that moment, but for me, I should know what's where and how it's being derived and why, because things, you know, happen for certain reasons. So, but I like that, like you kind of can't get an all pleasure, all perfect chart in this system. Like, there's going to be some shit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is, you run into this with elections all the time. Like if you're looking for the perfect moment to do a thing, Mars and Saturn are still there in the sky somewhere. So you can put them in an averse house or something like this, like the homie is gonna be here and you need to take this into account.
And there's the two things that I really have been thinking about this week. One is where I want to be clear when I said where bad Christianity goes wrong. Because I do not think this is an indictment of total Christianity, which I actually think is very good often about acknowledging people's suffering and being very aware of people's suffering. But there can be a don't cry at the funeral, your aunt is in heaven, you know.
Right.
Isn't that great denial of actual feelings? I think it's a bad thing. It's, you know, Saturn's always there somewhere. Life has these ruffles and edges and things to it. There is no perfection, right? You can get better at stuff. Things could change, but to be perfect is to be dead, right? And so, like, there's sometimes a longing for the perfection of the kingdom that comes, right? When all sorrow will be lost, all things will be gone. That I am suspicious of, and I do not think is actually endemic to that system. I think that's a layer.
So by perfection here, you mean ultimate goodness.
Yeah, I'm suspicious of that.
Yeah. See, that's part of why I like the harmony and balance of astrology, and like I think of it as perfect.
Sure. Yes.
I have thought many times about like the way that the world unfolds, and the world unfolds in the one way. Right. It is shaped in the way that it is shaped. Because it is shaped the way that it is shaped, and it is therefore perfect. It cannot possibly go wrong. Like the way that it happened is not the wrong way because it's the way. Now, I don't have to like it. Right. Trust me. I don't like quite a lot of it. I don't like most of it, maybe even.
Yeah.
But wonderfully, I am not the arbiter of good and evil. I would hate to be the arbiter of good and evil.
I got a wrinkle on this one for you. Okay. We talk about this sometimes. I got a new thought on it. I don't actually. There's no answer on this one. I got an actual question. So, what do you do with multidimensional theory?
Ah, man, like, okay, so you're talking about the multiverse, right?
Yeah. The multiverse idea.
is
Like,
all right, so because dimension is a weird word to use.
sure. Multiverse
Dimension
is great here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there was a multiverse,
mm-hmm.
I don't know how you can't look at the set of multiverses and then be like, that's the whole. You know what I mean? Like this idea that it infinitely splinters into
right. And that infinity is the whole picture, not just the one that you understand or that you experience.
Yeah. I mean, sure. It's like, is this provable? You know what I mean? Like,
no.
is it useful at all?
Probably not. The one thing I find interesting for this conversation, though, is that if you accept the premise for a second that it's not just this reality, but like all of them is where that perfection unfolding that you're talking about happens, right? One of the questions is, oh no, I just answered my own question. Shit. No, because the thing is, then all branches have to happen, so all the goods and bads still have to happen for that to still be the same thing. It ends up being the same thing.
Yeah. I just don't know how you're not going to arrive at unity at a certain layer.
Yeah. My contention with this is that I do think there's a capacity for things to go slightly different ways. So I'm gonna.
Okay, so you're talking about selection now.
Yes.
And so this is the idea that I've heard Mitch Horowitz talk about. There are many possible futures, and the magic is in selecting which one you want and pulling that one toward you so that you arrive in the future that you like most, right?
Yes. Although, what I will say is, you'll notice that I started this whole thing talking about the importance of a communal nature to this.
Sure.
So,
because we all select things all the time.
We all select things all the time. We're all working together, selecting, doing anything else. And the version that you may find the one that works the best may not be the one that is the best for you. Do you know, in the sense that like, there's a balance again in the way that things become possible, right? Mm-hmm. And Mitch Horowitz talks about this too. He's actually pretty good on the like, your circumstances and everybody else's choices affect things too. It's not, you did not select cancer, most likely. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not how that works. It's not that. And I think it's a pretty elegant way out of some of the new thought, like choose you're just not trying hard enough. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But,
and this is to that point, hold that thought to that point, this is why I talk about the creation event as ongoing. Yeah. And each of us is currently creating the world as it is right now. Yeah. And so this is this idea that like we're all, and so we could use create or select kind of interchangeably here. Like we are all in this space where I like to think of it as shape, right? And so you create by being in this position now, and you can create the future by pushing yourself in whatever direction you want to be. And all of us are constantly doing that all the time.
You know, I wonder, I wish this is a case where I wish we could turn to the readers and the listeners and say, listeners, would you please call in and answer?
Sure.
I wonder how many people.
Well, we do have a comment section.
We do have a comment section.
Feel free to put something in the comment section here.
Hit us up. I wonder how many people, when you say the first bit about the perfection of the world, right? I wonder how many people automatically apply an apocalyptic lens to it, or the eternal diamond theory, where like all time has already happened. Do you know what I mean? where
Oh,
like
sure.
everything's already fixed in some ways. And so
Sure.
not only is it the way it is, you know what I mean? It is also already the way it must be. Right.
Well, sure. And man, this is really hard to disprove because, like, so I don't think that causation is well understood by humans at all.
No.
So, like, so you just never get to the back of that question. Like, so why did the thing happen? Well, it's because of this. And then it's like, okay, well, why did that happen? It's like, well, because of all of these things. And so why did each of those happen? Well, it just go back further and further, right? And so what you kind of arrive at is this Robert Sapolsky idea of like everything happens because of all of the things that happened before it. And that then causes all the other things to happen after it, which then are the things that are before the things that, and so that is all. And so even if you do the thing where it's like, okay, well, I'm doing jazz hands now in order to prove that like I have free will. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing that because I'm in this discussion about free will. And so then how, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
you're at a minimum, even in a light touch version of that, your responses are conditioned. This is the, like, there's like 700,000 chess moves possible, but only like 10 of them are good opening moves. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to win the game. Like, it's the same kind of thing. Like only jazz hands could save us now. So you had to make that choice.
Indeed, it was a bold move. It was very courageous.
It was a good thing that's actually how nuclear war was averted. Was you using jazz hands at this particular moment? Glad you didn't miss that one.
Do what I can. Don't mind me. Just a hero.
So what you're talking about there is, of course, like the idea that, like, to some extent you can't ever really tell how much of this is predetermined in one way or the other.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you just behave as if it's not because you can measurably improve your life by doing things in the world.
By behaving that it's not. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. So actually I was listening to a guy talk about revivals recently, and he was caught up in some really dumb shit Calvinist theology where he's like, well, you can't make God do a revival. So God's just going to do it whenever God wants to do it. But then he was also trying to advise people to pray for a revival. But if you pray for a revival, that sounds an awful lot like asking or making God do a thing. So you just have to pray knowing it probably has no effect on whether or not God does anything.
Sure.
But you praying it is a demonstration that it could happen.
Sure. Yeah. So you have to engage with this idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, now, what about prayer? Or you could get into like Solomonic magic or the PGM or this kind of thing. Like, what about this? And so then, did my prayer make it happen? Or sometimes I think about it from the other direction of like, was my prayer an announcement
of its arrival?
Yeah. Of its arrival. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like the thing was already headed here and it had to go through my prayer in order to arrive where we are now, you know?
Well, and, actually, my mom, who's much more in a sort of like conservative Christian mystic kind of position on this kind of stuff, she and I actually shared the idea a lot that prayer is attunement. You, in her language, you're coming to know the will of God and lining yourself up with it. And in my language, you're coming into harmony with the universe and understanding what's possible. And by my language, I mean the same one Cornelius Agrippa was using. Like, it's not my idea.
Sure.
So there is something of like attuning to the nature of things, except at the same time, you seem to get effects that you wouldn't get otherwise. Do you know what I mean? Like, you seem to be able to do things you wouldn't do otherwise. And that
you just can't prove that you weren't going to get those effects otherwise.
No, you can't prove it. But
there's no control experiment.
No. Well, who wants one? Now you're back in the multiverse,
guys, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're back in the multiverse. But I think that what happens here is I have yet to see that Calvinist idea of like, if I'm acting good, it must be because God made me good, and that makes me good, and I'm better than other people. I've yet to see that actually like improve shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of philosophies around like, oh, well, if I gently nudge things, if I understand the nature of reality and I act in accordance with it, but I am acting with it. And this gets back to what I was going to highlight about what I thought was cool about your clarification in case people hadn't heard it about process, right? You are one of the beings who is creating the thing that is happening. And yes, through all of our co-creation, the effects you may have or the outcomes may be A, beyond your understanding, or B, out of your complete control. But how you go about creating does affect things, right? And when we take eternity out of the picture for a second and say, no, it's a processional event, we are all, in fact, we actually have quite a lot more responsibility to do things, to act, and to be there because it's up to us.
Right. Well, so I think where a lot of people fall off with determinism is this idea that like nothing matters. But what you're getting at is like, no, it matters. You are playing a part in this thing, and your part may be scripted already, but like get on the fucking stage, bro. Like you're like play your role because it's that role is important in the whole picture.
I think I've told this story before, so I apologize if I told this story, but it was one of my first really humbling lessons about magic. Was I kept having these dreams that our dear friend fireman Kevin was going to get into some trouble. I felt compelled to pray to Saint Minos, the wonder worker, who, by the way, highly recommend if you're looking for a saint. That dude comes through. I did a whole big operation, including a big prayer on this particular day for St. Minos' day and everything else. Next day, Kevin calls me and tells me that he randomly felt the need to leave a basement with his buddies, pulled everybody out, and the whole house blew up. I had a moment of crisis, called my buddy Luke, who is a scientist and thinks this is all crazy. And he called me on the carpet for being arrogant because I was like, what if I hadn't prayed? Would Kevin have died? And he's like, you think you're the only person who the universe has to pray? What an arrogant motherfucker, you know? I was like, well, that's true. But I do think sometimes we are gifted the opportunity to be one of the people who steps into those gaps, right? Like the unfolding of the universe has called for a hero, right? And if you want, you can be the one who steps into that story. You may not be, and then someone else will step into the story, you know?
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So we're back to this idea of choice again.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I've noticed about astrology is that the people who resonate with the moment are the ones who play heroic roles in that moment.
Sure.
And so I wonder, so like the one that I most recently talked about was James Earl Jones, who is like all Saturn, everything, new moon in Capricorn, on the rising, conjunct Saturn. And so it's just all Saturn, everything in this guy's chart. And then he goes on to, excuse me, it takes him a really long time. He like stutters as a youth, and then it turns out to be like one of the greatest speakers that ever happened in the world. I am noticing that I'm trying to tell this story and I'm having trouble even fucking talking right now. So fun fact.
It's the ghost of James Earl Jones coming in and being like, how dare you speak about me in this context?
Yeah, the ghost of Saturn, probably.
Yeah, sure.
But and then he goes on to be, like Darth Vader, like dressed in all black, terrifying overseer. And then and somebody brought up the Sandlot. Like scary guy behind a fence, scary old dude behind the fence, like this, just like all Saturn, everything, this guy. And so he is called into these Saturn roles. And so I wonder how much choice, how much self-determination there is in that situation. Because it seems called to me.
Sure. So I actually think the call is a real serious thing, but I think you can deny a call.
Can you?
Or it takes a different shape. So my thing is like how much personally called, right? How many other James Earl Joneses were there that were also called
Sure.
that didn't, for one reason or another, step in to the shape? Because I think one of the reasons I like the shape idea a lot, even though I don't think about it as much as you do, but I do like it a lot, is at that point in time, the universe wanted a James Earl Jones shape. Or wanted a shape of somebody who would have a voice, bring in the Saturn energy, do these things. And you kind of get to this, are you going to be the person who jumps in or not? Because I wonder about the idea that I myself am, that all my actions, like, am I so important that all my actions are determined? Or is there just a shape that's determining things and I kind of attach to it or no? You know what I mean? Like if you, wait, they got a head jiggle in a face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so your question was, am I so important that, ask that question again.
So am I so important that every single action of mine is determined so that the universe can work? Or
Yes.
is it that there are shapes the universe needs and we can step into them or not?
I like all of that except the or not at the end. Yes to both of them. It is an ordered universe and you can step into the shape. That's your option. You can do that.
But if you can step in, that means you can choose not to step in.
Ah, right. Is that, and I just don't know that.
Sure.
Because like,
no, I don't know either.
I've had things that I've been called to in my life. And then I worked to not follow that call. And then got my ass kicked and was like, okay, well, I guess this is what I'm doing now, and
yeah.
Like, and that's personal experience. I don't know that everyone has this experience, but I have definitely been in that place where some like wild spirit shit is going on, and it's like, okay, and try to not do it. Like be like, I don't want that. I don't. Please don't. I don't. And then find myself in it. And be like, okay, I guess I'm the guy.
Just pray that this cup be taken from you.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and the cup is not taken from you when I be like, it's like that Lord of the Rings meme where Frodo's like, oh, I wish it had not been this way, and Gandalf says Elmau. Sorry, bro. Don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, tough.
Right.
I had somewhere else I was going to go with it, but that's cracked me up so bad. I'm having a hard time bringing it back.
Sure.
So wait, I'm trying to remember, did you and I get into the story of Jonah?
Not here.
Not here. Okay. Yeah. So a friend of mine is Christian mystic. She's going through some stuff, and she's got real angel stuff going on. She got real deep into Christian stuff recently. And I find this amusing and interesting. You know what I mean? I'm down for these conversations. And so she has started sending me a bunch of different Christian memes that she's into at the moment, which I actually also find hilarious. Like, I consent. This is great. Please keep sending it to me. But one was this dumb meme where this woman was like, what do men even talk about when women aren't there? And this guy's like, okay, so here's what's going on with the story of Jonah. And then he does this whole take on the story of Jonah. And it's very funny, but his take is a good one, which is, so for people who don't know the story of Jonah and the whale, Jonah...
Just tell the story.
So Jonah's the prophet of Jeroboam, prophet of the king. And God shows up and is like, hey, Jonah, I want you to go and talk to the enemy of the Israelite people, the kingdom of Assyria. I want you to go over in the city of Nineveh and bring the good word that they should worship me. And I'm going to bring my blessings to them. And Jonah in the story wants no piece of this. He's like, no, thank you. And he decides he's going to run away from God. He's like, I'm out. And so he ends up getting on a boat, and he's like, where are you going? They're like, not Nineveh. He's like, fantastic. That sounds great. Let's go someplace else. And he's on the boat, and storm comes up, and like they're all gonna die. And so they're like, all right, we're gonna draw lots, see who we have to sacrifice, who we got to appease Poseidon with here. And it comes up to Jonah, and they're like, but the captain actually in the story, there's a couple nice notes here in the story. The guy's like, I'm not gonna just throw this random dude off the boat. Like why is it his fault? That's not good. And so they draw lots again. It's Jonah again, and all the sailors are like, I think it's pretty clear who needs to go off the boat. And the captain again is like, I'll try to protect you. You know what I mean? Like this, they're just scared. You know, it'll pass. I'll try to protect you. And Jonah is like, you know what, man? Fuck it. Throw me off the boat. This is another great moment. He's like, I'm not going to Nineveh. I don't care what God does. Drown me. So they throw Jonah into the sea, and a whale swallows Jonah, and keeps him alive inside the belly of a whale for an extended period of time, where Jonah's stuck in there praying, doing fishy shit, eating random octopuses that come in, whatever's going on. And finally he's like, fuck it. I'll go. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll go to Nineveh. And the whale beaches and pukes Jonah up on the shore, which is as a kid, was one of my favorite parts of the story. It was just covered in whale guts and shit.
Right.
So he goes to Nineveh, and I assume at some point he washes off the whale guts, and he gives like the most lackluster sermon ever. He's like, yeah, the God of the Israelites. Woo, yay. You know? And the people are astounded. They're like, oh, fuck. We should change our ways. We've heard the good word. We should do this. And Jonah is mad. He's so fucking pissed off about this. He's like, these are the enemies of my people. I didn't even want to be here. Now they're all converting to worship my God. I hate all of this. And he goes, it's my favorite part of the story. The other part, he goes and sits under the shade of like a fig tree, right? He's just hanging out. He's like sulking about this. And the fig tree, God causes the fig tree to wither up and die, and like above him while it's happening. And Jonah is like, fuck all this. Why did the fig tree die? I'm mad at you about the fig tree. I'm like, he's like kicking rocks, you know, he's just really pissed off. And God's like, you're so mad about the fig tree, but you weren't like mad about these people in Nineveh that I was going to destroy if they didn't like convert. But then the ending's kind of ambiguous. Like Jonah doesn't have anything to say at the end, right? It's kind of a little like, maybe you shouldn't have tried to destroy everybody in the first place. Maybe that's on you, you know? It's kind of the vibe. Anyway, this take I heard, which I think is a good one, is the story is often told in Christian circles as like, what do you do when you avoid God? You know what I mean? You can't get away from God, or you know, your fear is irrelevant, or, you know, here with Jonah, who's afraid to spread the good word. So you should totally go down your neighbor's long driveway and knock on their door and tell them about the Bible. You know, this kind of shit. This guy's take was a good one. Jeroboam is a bad king, right? Which is in the Bible stories. Like he's a nasty piece of work. And Jonah is kind of pulling a prophet for hire. Like he's kind of trying to hold the kingdom together. He's trying to keep the blessing of God on the kingdom for his people. And when God's like, you know what, fuck it, let's take this show to Nineveh, he's like, no, I'm afraid for all my people, you know. Like, I'm not afraid to die myself, clearly, you know, but I'm afraid that this is going to change things in a way that I can't handle, you know. And so that's why he's running away. He's running away to sort of like, it's almost like he stole God's blessing and is trying to run off with it, you know, and move in that direction. So anyway, I think the story of Jonah is an interesting one to think with when we think about what can spirits make you do? How are we the tools of spirits? What is our role in all this sort of stuff?
Right. So when I was saying that, like, when you're called, do you really have a choice here? I think you've beautifully illustrated my point. Thank you. Except
I think there are some other things here. Okay. Jonah could have stayed in the whale. You know what I mean? Or he could have gone right off the bat and had a wholly different experience of what was going on there, right? Like, there's all kinds of different things that could have happened. but the actual teaching and the stuff that's interesting here doesn't come out of that story. So, like, do you get an option? I think you can, over time, turn a gift into something else, take a path that was unexpected. You know what I mean? You may end up with the same vocation, but it might look very different than what you thought it was going to look like at the beginning. You know, I think to some degree, Jonah was mad that all he had to do was come and mumble a few things. Like his own like preaching was irrelevant. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't. There's no ego for him there. And so, I think for me, I think it's that, like, let's say you have a vocation to being a good parent, right? You got a vocation for that. Fall in love with somebody who can't have kids for various reasons. You guys can't adopt, you know, and you end up becoming somebody who is a really good coach of a kid's softball team or something, and really becoming a parent to hundreds of kids over the years, right? The vocation's there, you know what I mean? But I think it can take different shapes, and we can choose some of that, how it looks.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel very vindicated by this story. I thought you were gonna argue against me, and
No,
I don't think that's what happened.
No, I don't.
I do wonder.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there is something to the idea that you will express what you are, with the shape you are to express. I just think it can take lots of different avenues.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, definitely. And this is part of the reason why transits will hit people in lots of different ways, because they're, you know, it's 7 planets in 12 signs. There's only so much that, you know, like, so that because of that, there are myriad things that are associated with each one of those 7 and 12. And so when something is going on in the sky, then I experienced that, and it was spot on, and it was perfect, and it was different from the thing that you experienced, which was also spot on and perfect, which is different from all the other, how many billion are we at? 8 yet?
I think it's close to 8. Yeah.
Yeah, people who each experience something spot on and perfect, which is different from each other. Yeah.
Really
amazing the way that works.
It really is amazing. And, you know, so many different flowerings of, I was at I got a chance to hear a guy speak who's been running a sort of kink chateau for over 30 years. He's run the longest dungeon in the United States.
Okay.
He was telling me that he had personally worked with 750 couples and had taken intakes and conversations and given advice to around 7,800 people on this kind of stuff. Right. Just like, and by the way, the energy this dude gave away was like a saint. It was like, he just real chill, brighten up the room, everything else. He was talking about his philosophy, and he was like, there are 350 million ways to be happy in America alone. You know, and my role is to facilitate that for people. You know? And I think there's something about that we, you know, I think sometimes in the free will and choice conversation, we can get flattened out, right? And get philosophical and abstract and flattened out. But one of the things that's beautiful about the process stuff you were talking about is that it allows each of those to flower, right? Like each of those is a part of things. Even if I think sometimes we have some shapes we take alongside that, but we're also here in a way that I think the more Calvinist or more traditional role of this kind of flattens everybody to one choice or one thing. It's like, no, it's way more complicated and beautiful. Yeah.
And must be
for it to be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like, you know, the villains are as important as heroes are.
Yeah.
Although what?
I just realized there was a point where there's only like 2,000 people. So for a little while there's only like 2,000 ways for people to be happy.
Right.
So if they're
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one of the interesting things about living in the moment that we're in. We've seen a great proliferation of ideas.
Yes.
There are new ways to do stuff. There are new methods of approach that people simply have not thought of yet.
Yeah.
And if we continue to go on this way, then there will be yet more ways to that people will sit, you just brainstorm and be like, oh, you could do this one.
Yeah.
Why don't we try this out?
Sometimes when people talk about reincarnation, they get that kind of like not great take where they're like, well, how come there's more people all the time? And I'm like, I don't know, more people get born, or you know what I mean? Like, or,
Sure.
or we make new things, or I don't know, for a long time, 800 billion of us were stuck in a star or something, and now we decided to come down here. Like, I don't know how this shit works.
Sure.
But there is something I find hopeful, the idea of incarnated humans multiplying, so there's more of us because maybe there's more things to do. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we're at a point where like we need more potential with a great idea. So more of us are showing up to try to help us get into the next thing. I find that really compelling.
That's so cute. All right. Half of me wants to end on that cute and hopeful dynamic. The other half of me wants to know what beef this god has with fig trees. Why does this motherfucker be killing these fig trees like this? What is going on?
Right. It's rude.
I love figs.
It's rude. Figs are great. And he sees his son down, his son's all cracking on fig trees and shit too. Like, what the fuck
just because he's fucking pissed one day? Like, over nothing?
I think people should think a little more with that. You're like, he was the divinely perfect son of God. I'm like, that fig tree thing feels uncool on a deep level. Do you know what I mean? Like,
uncool is exactly the right word for it. Just it's fucking, what are you doing, dude?
He's like, oh, this isn't ready yet.
Right. Like, the tree's like, it's not, we're not in season yet, dog. I got 3 months left. Give me 3 months. And Jesus is like, fuck you in your 3 months. I'm going to kill you. How about that?
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is like, you turned water into wine, dude. You can't tell me you can't ripen up a fig if you're really pissed about it. Like,
truly.
Like, show some, like, also, it puts Judas in a different light because, listen, if you're hanging out with a dude and, he's doing crazy miracles and everything else, and then one day he's like, fuck that fig tree, and it just dies in front of you, you're like, I don't know if it's good having this dude around. You know what I mean? Like,
word. Yeah, right? It's the Superman thing, right? The Superman versus Lex Luthor. It's like, yo, we got to do something about this guy.
Yeah.
He's going to be a problem.
It's a problem. One of my favorite medieval versions of this is the Nibelungenlied, this German fairy tale. It's the version, same Siegfried, the Dragon Slayer, like the whole story. It's the German version of it. And the Lex Luthor and or Batman, depending how you like to think about, because Batman's always got one of those, like, maybe we should kill Superman plans too, right?
Sure.
Is this dude named Hagen of Tronek. That's his name. In the Norse version, he's Haken. But like, I just love Hagen of Tronek. I'm like, it's like the most Jim Bro name ever. But anyway, Siegfried's running around. He's German Superman. You know what I mean? He can't be killed by shit. He's running around like doing everything. And Hagen is just like, this motherfucker is a problem. You know what I mean? But it's the most. He goes to Siegfried's lady. He's like, hey, I hear that Siegfried has one weak spot. And you know where it is. And I want to protect him because, he's so great. But if you could maybe put like a cross on the weak spot so I know where to not let him get hit, that'd be super helpful. And she's like, great. Yeah, sure. She like makes the other thing is like, that's so cool. Thanks. We're going to go hunting. And then the next thing is he just throws a spear in that dude's back. And then when people ask him about it later, like there's a whole scene later where he's getting like tortured to death. He's like in a snake pit, and everybody's like, "How do you feel about fucking killing Siegfried now. He's like, it was the right decision. You guys are crazy. He's like getting bit all over by snakes. He's like, I was right.
I'm a stand on business.
That guy was a pain in the ass, and he was a serious fucking problem. That was the first time, like, reading that book. I was like, man, Lex Luthor, he might be the hero. Like, he might be right about this shit.
I mean, he's like a corporate president or whatever. Like,
That's the problem.
No love for this guy either. But
yeah,
I can see why Superman could immediately be seen as a tyrant, and we got to do something about this. Did
you ever read the Frank Miller's Batman, the Batman Returns, the original graphic novel thing? I'll tell people what, if you don't want to read it, it's worth watching the cartoon they made out of it too. Like, they did a good job with the cartoon, but it's where Batman does kick Superman's ass, and they explain how they do it, and you're like, okay, it's worth it. It's worth your time. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't gotten into it. But
all right, no spoilers. No spoilers
for this thing that was written in the 80s. But it was
sure. Right on. Yeah, we're out of time anyway. Anyway, if you want to get a geomancy reading, then where should such as we have demonstrated earlier in this episode, where do the people go?
You should come to wilkinsbryan.com. You can hit me up there, and we can get a reading going. It probably will reference Hagen of Tronek and Batman. That's how this goes. So caveat emptor. That's how it is. And if you would like to either have a reading, much as we did tonight, looking at sort of how your nativity could affect your love life and where you should go with it, I believe you should head over to ZamboniFunk.com. and get yourself a reading over there. Zamboni, don't you have a class coming up?
I do. October 24th, we begin astrology from the ground up for people who want to learn astrology, who want to do readings themselves, who don't necessarily want to pay all this money to somebody else to do readings for them. You can learn how to do astrology for your damn self, and learn how to look into the future, and learn how to help other people out with stuff. And
would I be able to, like, go to astro.com and understand what all those little fidgety bits mean if I take your class, Zamboni? Like extended charts and
so I'm going to teach you how to read a wheel chart. There are fidgety bits at the bottom, which is a square chart that I actually don't know how to read. It's all the same information, but I don't know how to read it, and so I'm not going to teach that. I'm only going to teach you things that I actually know how to read.
This podcast is totally devoted to round charts. That's what we're trying to tell you.
Correct.
Shit, get out.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, I'm super excited about that course. I think it's going to be super dope. There's a workbook component to it as well. So you're going to be able to, as we go through the class, then you will take the information that we've learned and apply it immediately and read your own chart. By the end, we'll have done not only that reading, but also a reading for another person. So you'll already be getting some reps in. I am looking forward to training up a pretty dope and tough cohort of astrologers. I think it's going to be real great. It's going to be an improvement on the last one, and the last one got great reviews. So check all that out, ZamboniFunk.com. Delicious Brian Wilkins, thank you so much for being here another time. What a delight this always is.
It's so good to see you, buddy. I love getting into the weeds with you. It's the best. It's the absolute best.
For sure. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Yep. Peace and blessings, family. Thank you so much for being here. I will check y'all next time.
We will, everybody.